While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but for the passion to help others. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, those that keep the prisons secure, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast, and we're coming back to you with another amazing guest. It is early in the morning on a Thursday. I know when this airs it's going to be a Tuesday, later in the year, or maybe first of the year, depends on how it goes. But I haven't done a podcast in the morning in so long that I'm actually very excited because I am a morning person. Based on my chronotype, my best thinking, my best learning, just my creative thoughts flow the best early in the morning. Most of the times I find myself recording late at night, usually around 8 or 9. So this is very refreshing to have the opportunity to be on a podcast and channel that energy that I start off with early. As each of you know, this podcast is about humanizing the badge, whether you're in the uniform right now, or you're someone that supports law enforcement, or you're just someone that isn't really sure if we're real people or not. So this is the opportunity that I want to give you to kind of see that the men and women that wear a uniform of whatever agency they're in, whether it's sheriffs, police, federal, corrections, tribal, that you understand that they go through different things in their lives just like you do, and that they are pushing and finding ways to make it work. Our guest today is no different from any of the other people in that sense because he is a human like the rest of us. And I'm excited. I met him a few months ago. I met him at an FBI National Academy Conference, and I'm so excited I'm finally able to get him on because, like me, he does have a podcast as well. And the things that we talk about, it's similar because we're trying to promote this industry. So it's always exciting to get a fellow podcaster on, especially someone that's really approaching a brand and that's been in law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. All right, guys, this is the time that we're going to bring our guest in. John Vik, tell us who you are.
Well, good morning, Michael, and thanks for having me on your podcast. And I wish that I could say that it was on purpose that I set you up for a morning time, but that's just seems like what we both had available. So I'm kind of a morning person. That's when I try to get a lot of my work done too. But happy to be here, and I work for the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, the larger sheriff's offices here in the state. And currently in my role, I am the captain of professional standards here. Some of my colleagues in professional standards will know that brings with it some things that come to mind relatively easily, but a lot of times it brings duties as assigned that don't neatly fit into another division. So that's what I find myself doing most days, all of the personnel and education, professional development stuff, but a lot of our business side of the house too.
John, let me ask you something very quickly. How did you get into professional standards? Because it's interesting. I've never been in that role, and even back when I was a police officer, I don't really remember if anybody at the Tallahassee Police Department had that particular role. But did you apply for something like that? Is it just natural, like a trick? Like did it just happen? Like how does that work?
Well, it's an interesting story. Actually, back in 2017, my office did not have a division of, yeah.
Hey, everybody. I don't know if you can tell, but there was a small cut in the audio, and you guys know I hate cutting that cut in audio. But I am in a hotel room once again. This is I am trying a few different things out, and as John was speaking, my internet connection had a little misfire, so we are back. And before we got cut off by me, not John, we were talking about how he got into professional standards. How did he actually get into that role? So, John, if you don't mind repeating it, because you were getting into it, and then my internet connection just said, "Forget you." So, if you don't mind telling us how you got into that role.
No worries, Michael. This is real life. This is how it works behind the scenes.
Yes.
When my office was looking kind of just at the landscape of policing back in, the 20-teens, we'll call it, I think there was just a recognition that it's not only important that we are enforcing our standards within law enforcement, but also that we're really kind of identifying and setting what those standards are, but then we're also training, hiring, and firing by them. And it was really kind of a logical time for at least our agency to bring that purpose and that strategy to a division level. So we did a little bit of reorganization within our office. I had recently been promoted to captain, probably about 6 months before that happened. And one of our other division captains and I put together a proposal for our sheriff to realign some duties and divisions within the office, and the Division of Professional Standards was born. So I guess I had maybe the fortune that I didn't have to apply for anything that was created, but maybe the misfortune that I had to kind of build it from scratch. So I've definitely learned from a lot of other people, and can't claim credit for very much of that at all, but all with the goal of, not only trying to hold the standard as far as, the IA thing, I think, is what comes to people's mind when they hear professional standards, but we're trying to take an approach to professional standards that we want to build that from day one with our sworn staff, with our professional staff, and make professional standards something that we do every day, not just when the complaint comes in.
It's crazy, John, because what people don't realize is that things like internal affairs is needed. Like, do we say we have people that have either the appearance of misconduct or actually do things the wrong way? Yeah, people do. It's reality. It ain't just a law enforcement thing. Every organization, if you don't have one, private sector or not, you should have some form of internal affairs, because it's also part of the checks and balances of, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have been going 100 and a 35 just to go get lunch. Now, maybe if you're going 100 to a robbery call, that's one thing, which even probably isn't the best thing. But there has to be some kind of, person in between that can say, hey, you know what? This is what we need to do to kind of uphold our standards. So it's pretty cool that you were able to kind of build this from scratch. It sounds like you kind of volunteered for something that you didn't realize you were volunteering for. So it's always interesting to have that side of the story. But that's cool, man. When it comes to now you getting into this role, and this question literally just popped into my head as you were talking about it, how did that change the view of you amongst your peers? Because when I was in internal affairs, I ran that department for about 800 staff. I wasn't always looked at as the friendly guy anymore, even though my personality can be very open. I was kind of like, oh, here comes Michael. How did that change for you internally, as far as like your peers? Like when John walks in the room, like how did the atmosphere and culture start to change around you?
Yeah, it's to some extent, it's just the nature of what it is. I mean, sometimes we think of it as going to the principal's office at school or something like that, and so there's going to be a little bit of a change to it. I'm really fortunate at our agency that we spend very, very little time, if I actually broke it down, conducting, internal affairs investigations and things like that. They happen, like you said, they're a necessary part of law enforcement. But I try to make sure that that's a slice of what we do in our division, and not all of what we do in our division. So there's certainly been, just some changes, and I think part of that goes along with being a leader in your organization. But it's still always about the people, and taking care of those people, and sometimes taking care of our people looks different. Just like when we have kids, growing up in our families, the way that we take care of them looks different at times, but it's all with the best intentions in mind.
And when people see that, I think that's the important part, because although I used to get the side eyes, people knew where I was coming from with an intention side. They know that, hey, Michael's not headhunting looking for me. But if I did something wrong and Michael was approaching me, or I had to go see him, I knew to be truthful, because a lot of times I had situations where something big in internal affairs when I used to work is that people can have a union member with them. And
Yep.
it got to the point to where those staff that could do it, they wouldn't bring the union at all, either because they said they didn't want one, or the union said, hey, just go. He's going to be fair about it. So I think in your case, John, it sounds like you guys had that same culture in your office. Like, hey, you know what? If I got to go see John for whatever reason, I know he's just not picking on us. He's actually needs us because we probably did something that didn't make sense.
Yeah, we have values at our office, like most agencies across the country do, and our first value, we put it right in our strategic plan. We put it we actually listed our values on one of our sets of stairs going up, so people have to read them when they're climbing up the stairs. But it's treat everybody with fairness, dignity, and respect. And we treat that for our external customers, so to speak, so our citizens that we're dealing with on calls for service. But we also want to reflect that internally too, and we're treating each other and treating our own employees and members with fairness, dignity, and respect. And I think that's the only way that you can do it in law enforcement. If you go a different direction, it's going to create problems for everybody.
I like that. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. Now, you've been in law enforcement now since 2006, and we're not talking about your military time that you had before that. How have you seen, and this is not necessarily looking at the Lancaster Sheriff's Office, but obviously more on a macro level, have you seen that particular phrase change or be impacted by how we're viewed by the community?
I would say that in 2023, as you and I are talking right now,
Correct.
there have been, I certainly can't deny that there have been flashpoints in our industry and in our society that have brought some of those very issues, fairness, dignity, respect, all to the forefront. And I don't even have to go down the list of everybody that's listening to this knows what I'm talking about.
Correct.
I think that there's been a lot of buzzwords that have maybe come out of that, but at least for me in my career, we may have always talked about them. We've probably talked about them in different words to describe them, but for me, it's really always been the same. That you just want to treat people the way that you would want to be treated, or treat people the way that you want your family to be treated. And I know that back when I started, and I've benefited from a legacy of people. My sheriff's office is over 160 years old. I mean, I've benefited from people who've worked here long before me, that have laid the groundwork for the positive relationship that we have with our community today. And thank God that we have it. But I think this industry that we're in, law enforcement, it's the best job in the world. And the reason that it's the best job in the world is because it's a people business. It relies on those soft skills. It relies on compassion, empathy, courage, all of those things and words and buzzwords that we use to describe just taking care of our community and treating people the way that we want to be treated. So on the one hand, you hear pushes for this and that and all of these things, but I think the need has been there for thousands of years, and it'll continue to be there thousands of years from now. We have to treat people with fairness, dignity, and respect, by whatever terms you want to call it. Treat people the way that you'd want to be treated.
Well, we know there's always buzzwords. That's how the media, and that's how people like on social media. That's how you make money. I mean, that's just the way. It's the name of the game. People want conflict, but in a sense of to where obviously they want conflict from a distance, because nobody really wants to be involved in it besides people in law enforcement. We're the individuals that run towards gunfire when everybody's running away, which has always been crazy. But until you break that down, you start to truly realize that, you know what? We do have a tough job. We are in a people business. And I think when people don't understand that, especially people that are in law enforcement, they have a hard time coping with some of the external voices they hear about who they are in that uniform. But when you go back to your purpose, and if you understand your purpose in law enforcement, you're like, hey, I know I'm not going to deal with people always on their best day. I mean, I don't know about you, John, but most of the time, whenever I deal with community from the law enforcement side, probably about 80 to 90% is usually not being invited to the Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving. No. Most of the time, it's literally, hey, we got a problem. You need to fix it.
We are certainly not Publishers Clearinghouse. Very rarely do we get the opportunity to knock on someone's door and give them an award. Like you said, typically we're there for a problem, and law enforcement officers at their core are problem solvers. And I think if you approach your work that way, and you find that why, that I'm here to try and help my community by solving maybe even just a little piece of a problem today. And whether that's a problem in one person's life or it's a problem that's affecting, multiple people through our community, the really cool thing about law enforcement is that what you do makes a difference every day, and what you do is going to matter, because you're not just pushing money up the corporate ladder and building widgets, things like that. It is a people business. It's very fulfilling and rewarding work. But even when we're contacting people on what may not be a great day for them, law enforcement officers are squarely in a position all across this country to matter every single day.
And that, I do believe we do matter, just like everybody else. I mean, it's everybody has a significant role in this world. It's just a matter of not if they can appreciate or understand what they have to offer.
Yep.
One of the things we talked about in the green room before we kind of got into it was, and we talked about it very, very briefly, so I don't want the audience to think I planned this, but as we start talking about just people, the community, our roles in society, I always think back to my role at home. And one of the things that are very important to me, especially now since I started to pay attention to it more, I could tell you even maybe 5-6 years ago, I didn't understand my role in this part, but our own wellness. How have you seen, like, with you, your family, that balance have to take more of a forefront now than back in 2006 when you started? Or 2007, sorry.
Yeah, wellness is absolutely critical to our profession. And there are a lot of things that are stacked up against law enforcement officers. And there was a study. Forgive me, I'm trying to remember exactly when it took place, but it cited, that of law enforcement officers compared to the general public, just comparing the difference between the amount of critical incidents that a person experiences in their life. I mean, it was significantly different from maybe 1 or 2 for the average citizen to maybe hundreds, for a law enforcement officer over a 20-year career. And we have to do something. We're signing up for this career. We know the odds, and there's things that are stacked against us because we're not seeing people on their best days. We're not working in climate conditioned, offices all the time. We're out there doing the work on the streets in imperfect conditions, working with just like we are imperfect people. We have to do something to mitigate some of the risks that are out there for us, and that comes in all sorts of forms. Just physical wellness issues, sleep deprivation. It comes to family relationships, financial health, all of those things. It's so important that we set ourselves and our people up for success, because the better they're able to handle those issues, the better they're able to build resiliency against things that we know. I mean, the data's out there. We know that those are issues that impact law enforcement officers. The better we can mitigate those, the better they will be at ultimately serving their communities and making that difference that we so desperately need them to make.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And to let you know, and this is one of the articles I found. It was in the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin. Actually, I believe it was written by a fellow, someone that you may or may not know. He was FBI graduate as well from the National Academy. And in the article, he says that, and he had quoted from another study, was that police officers, in comparison to the general public, experience 178 traumatic events versus general public, which experience 3 to 4 throughout a lifetime. So that sheer number obviously really puts it on the forefront of how important wellness is. So for you in your role as a husband, a father, a police leader, how do you manage that? How do you really take that time and say, you know what, I need to slow down and bring my mental health back to the forefront?
Yeah, I think it comes in a few different ways, and I'm by no means perfect. I mean, we all try different things throughout our lives, and the circumstances change. I can tell you where I'm at right now. I'm married, have 4 great kids at home, and we were talking before we came on air that schedules are a little bit crazy right now, and like you said, balancing work, balancing the home life, and all of that stuff, and just on top of all of the things that come with law enforcement, even without a critical incident, people have stuff that go on. The homework still needs to get done. We still need to date our spouses and significant others. We still have to make sure that we're meeting our marks at work, and that's without a bad day. So for me, it's really rhythm and trying to find healthy rhythms that you can set up, and some of that for me did come from the National Academy. I had the benefit of attending the National Academy in fall of 2022, session 284, high identity 284. People out there, I know everybody says that their class is the best, but ours was certainly the best.
I do hear that a lot, yes.
Yeah, but we spent a lot of time going over the physical health stuff, the mental health, just the mindfulness and type of activities that you can do. I'd been doing some of that stuff before I went out to Quantico, but I'm certainly a lot more intentional about it now. For me, it really is having some sort of daily physical exercise. So whether that's running, whether that's doing some weights, flexibility type stuff in our gym, I do try to do something at least 5 days a week to set myself up for success in that way. And that kind of helps me, obviously, from a physical standpoint. But I mean, I set a reminder on my calendar just so that I go downstairs and get away from my desk for a while, because even if I'm not drawing strictly a physical benefit from working out for the day, it definitely helps me mentally just to kind of unplug for a little bit, reset the machine, and then I can kind of hit the afternoon running again. So the physical part is certainly something that's very important, at least to me personally. The other stuff, as far as the mental health and just those rhythms, I do think that it's important to, certainly surround yourself with good people, practice kind of that attitude of gratitude, people call it. And a lot of it is, and people think it's mushy gushy stuff, but being able to set yourself up so that you can view the world in a positive sense. And same thing, we're talking statistics. It's easy to find all the negative stuff out there. You can go and find negative stuff before you even walk out the door of your house every day. But I think if you find the positive things and you go and look for those, just like negativity is contagious, positivity is contagious as well. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're setting up your mindset and your mental attitude to be successful, because that builds momentum in your mental health as well. And for me, the third leg of that stool is spiritual health for me. And I'm active in my faith, and my faith is super important to me. And so I think that it's important to stay grounded in that regardless of what faith you practice or choose to believe or not believe. For me, knowing that I'm here for something bigger than myself, and that hopefully I'm trying to, back to what we were talking before, contribute to my community and leave this world better than I found it. I think those three things together for me are hopefully what's keeping me on a path, at least at this point.
Man, John, you gave so many different nuggets on there. Like, I'm taking notes, trying to keep up of all the things that I want to touch on. Because I was like, man, he said a lot of great things. Like everything, he probably gave at least 5 or 6 different golden nuggets. And that's just me, what I was able to write down in time, because I was listening to what you were saying. I was like, you know what? That all makes sense. First and foremost, you said married with 4 kids. So I have 1 son. And I know we talked about it earlier, when it comes to scheduling, it's a lot different planning for 1 kid versus 4. So I definitely give you applause, give you kudos, because dealing with 4 kids, yeah, and I'm sure they all have different personalities. So It's definitely something that's very appreciative. But something you said really early as it relates to the family side, and I don't get a chance to touch on this too much in my show, and it's not because I don't want to or I can't. It's just that I don't always hear it. But this is, once again, being the morning time, my brain is flowing very efficiently. You said something, a phrase that I think that we all have to get back to, especially if we have spouses. And I believe it plays a big part in our own mental wellness, because if your home's good, there's a better chance you're going to be happy at work. And there was a study I read a couple of years ago, actually might have been 2 years ago, that actually said people with happy homes tend to be more effective at work, because you're going to run into bad things at work, no matter pretty much any industry. But if you have that solid foundation at home, it's important. So one thing you said, and I love to see how you're able to do this, because I think a lot of people that may be in your situation need it. You talked about date our spouse, or how you date your wife. How does that process work?
Well, it's got to be intentional. It certainly doesn't happen by accident. You've met my wife Heather, and
yes,
she and I have actually gone to a few law enforcement conferences together, and one that we went to was I think it was a Caliber Press training, and so I cannot claim, this is not my line. This is Kelly's line from Caliber Press, but he and his wife gave a presentation, and they said, nobody I'd rather. And so that's something that Heather and I will say to each other a lot is, nobody that I'd rather do X, Y, and Z with. Now, sometimes, you're doing something that's not so fun. And so it's just a little way to kind of build that humor into it. But, when you're in the trenches with the family stuff, but the reason I say that is that it has to be intentional, and you have to, whether you want everything to be spontaneous and this great relationship, but at least in my experience, great relationships are not spontaneous. They are just like many things that go well in our lives, they take work and they take strategy and they take intention. And so I would say, you know, for us, that's the way that we have to make it work. And we're not perfect. There's certainly times that we've gone longer of a stretch than we want to, but I'll give you a funny example, Michael. We were out, I think it was just this last weekend. We snuck away just to go grab dinner, kind of a little ways away from our house, and our kids now are old enough that at least our oldest can watch them with some relative restrictions in place. And we had just sat down. I think we're maybe just sat down at dinner, maybe just getting to the restaurant, and we got a call from home. And I didn't even know how to explain this other than to say that we got news that one of our kids had buttered the dog, and there was
that's funny.
There was
funny.
Butter in the dog's hair, and you know, we both kind of looked at each other like, I don't know what to do with that, but you know, it's important that we spend some time, that they know mom and dad are you know, we're gonna sit down and have dinner, and we made a plan to do this, so we're gonna do it. And they got through it. We got the dog cleaned up, but yeah, it's you know, it's not always sunshine and lollipops when you're doing that stuff. Sometimes you end up with butter on the dog, but it's certainly important to make time for that regardless.
But that's the fun part of it. And one quote I'm going to read back to you, and I think you should probably either make this a presentation or make it a quote that you really exemplify to not just your spouse, but the people around you. One thing you said was, great relationships are not spontaneous. Like, that's a lot of intentionality that you have to have, because, and it ain't just talking about with your spouse, it's about anything we do. And it's easy for us to say, well, we'll see what happens. But a lot of times nothing happens. So when you're trying to cultivate relationships with other people, it has to be intentional on both sides. You definitely can't say, oh, I want to build a better relationship with my team, and you just expect them to do it, or they're not doing it back with you. Vice versa, you can't just say, oh, I want to have an intentional relationship with my spouse, and that person doesn't reciprocate. So it's that you say that, and I want, once again, people that are listening, that they understand that in your life, to help manage some of the stress, you have to be intentional about relationships. You have to be building anything with somebody else, because it does provide a lot to you. And then obviously, you could probably just call a presentation "Butter the Dog" or something like that. I thought that was pretty funny. It would be very intriguing. Let's see where he's going with this.
Yeah, and let's see where he's going with this. Yeah.
they could say, you could say, yeah, what like butter the dog, and just say, these are things I learned from buttering the dog. And then kind of from there and talk about family relationships and how it's important, but also giving responsibility to the other kids. I think of these random things, but butter the dog would be a very fun presentation, because you would get a lot of people intrigued, and they're like, I've never heard this. Like, is this going to be something just regular, sexual? We really don't know where he's going with this thing, but he could definitely take it from any angle. So just that, you know, if you haven't thought about that, butter the dog would be pretty cool to talk about.
I'll put that one down. I'll put that on the idea list, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, that was so cool. That is. But you're right. But you have to be intentional about spending time with your spouse, and things happen.
Yep.
Like, and I'm happy you keep bringing it up as far as, hey, we're not perfect, but we still got to try different things, because if we're trying, then we're going to find ourselves stagnant, and then we're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and I think you know, you mentioned the family connection with that, and it's very easy to also use that same logic with our community, right? So having relationships with your spouse, your significant other, with your kids, it takes intention. It doesn't just happen. And I think that's something that's important in law enforcement. Whether, you know, it shouldn't be a buzzword, but it's certainly a push right now. And probably maybe it's a push right now because we didn't do a good enough job at it before. But building relationships with our community are also things that don't just spontaneously happen. without without some sort of intention, some sort of plan, some sort of purpose. And so I think that's something, at least at our office, that we're really trying to take steps to achieve and work on purposefully. And I view that very the same way. The family is just a very small nuclear part of the broader community.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, once again, if you have that foundation at home, you're going to be able to carry it out to your workforce. So, like in cases in the community, if you understand the importance of being respectful, having empathy, having compassion, building hope, it's a lot easier to carry that to them and show them. Now, I was thinking about this phrase, and since I haven't been a street cop in a uniform in over a decade, is the phrase proactive policing still a thing? And I really don't know because I haven't done any homework on it.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, I'm sure that it's different in different regions and pockets around the community, but whether it's an issue in policing or just an issue that you're having in your own life, I mean, you got two choices. You can be reactive, you can sit back and wait for something to happen, or you can be proactive and try to do something to affect change, right? So
correct.
I think it may look different ways to different people, but certainly proactive policing, whether that's in terms of community engagement, building relationships, or just the more traditional things that people think about, the actual crime enforcement, and being out on the street interdicting crime. I think proactive policing, maybe by whatever term you want to use,
yes,
is a thing and will need to be a thing. I think there are people in our society that need us to be that for them. We hear a lot about about the bad guys and was this person treated fairly and was that person not treated fairly? Those are valid questions. But the person that gets left out of that conversation a lot is the crime victim, the person who maybe doesn't have the best situation going on at home, the person who's being exploited or trafficked. Those are the people that need us in law enforcement to not just sit around and wait for something to happen, handle the call, write the report, and move on to the next one. Those are the people in our societies, in our community, that are relying on us to be proactive and do something to affect that change.
And you know what? My question was was kind of off, but I should have clarified and said, which you gave a much better answer than what I was thinking in my head. I will tell you that right now. Is that term still being used, or is there something that's replaced? Because I know back when I was, once again, 15 years ago, that was a buzz term. Obviously, buzz meaning that you're still doing it, but that's what they were calling it. Has it been, and this was in Florida, so I don't know if this is nationwide. Especially back then, I did not have a macro view of law enforcement like I do now. But is it just a different term we're using? Because I know, I mean, we still do that. You got to do that. You have to be proactive. I was just wondering if that was still the buzzword.
I don't hear it in the middle of the country a lot. You hear community policing is kind of the fancy term these days, and even community policing, I think, means different things to different people depending on how you define that or quantify it. But we're all, back to what we talked about before. We're all talking about the same thing, whether we're using 2023 terminology or 1973 terminology. The methods may have changed, but the mission, I think, is still there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you 100%. I definitely believe, I mean, some people just are naturally good at it because they're intentional, but they're very good at in the community, getting out there on the streets, and whether it's just looking for the bad guys or looking to be involved in community activities. I think that's always there. It's just sometimes it's filled by, unfortunately, and you said it very, very eloquently earlier when you talked about how we should be, or how it's better to look for the positive versus negative. If you can look for the negative, you can definitely find the positive, but you have to look for it. So sometimes things like community policing, since it's positive, it doesn't well as if we highlight the negative, because once again, people love controversy.
Yep. And I've listened to I listen to some podcasts, believe it or not. But there's there's a lot of there's a lot of people out there that are talking, a lot of people that are much smarter than I am, that have done some of the research behind this, and just what negativity can do to our brain, and we're somewhat wired to seek out that negativity, whether it's out of a survival instinct or whatever it is, because we as animals, as humans, want to be aware of things that are bad, things that might hurt us, and so there's already some of that wiring that's in place in our own heads. So we really have to harness that power of positivity to stay out in front of that.
Correct, and that's something we have to be proactive in our own mindset to do that. We shouldn't wait for somebody else, because it's a lot easier. I mean, like I said, controversy sells. I mean, it's just it's literally the nature of the game. Is people rather hear about that than saying you had you buttered the dog. People don't want to hear about that. They rather hear that you. They're going to talk about that.
It was a controversy that night, let me tell you.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You're like, well, let's finish eating this meal. Let's enjoy everything we can, because we know what we'll get to when we get home.
Yeah.
On that note, one of the things that we brought up early, probably like middle through our conversation, was the National Academy. Now, a lot of viewers, me, and I will be completely honest, about 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about the FBI National Academy. I mean, I knew there was an FBI, and I knew there was law enforcement, but I didn't really know there was any leadership and training mix. So, FBI National Academy is 10 weeks, correct?
Yeah, 10 or 11. I think mine was about 11 because we had a holiday in there.
Okay. So with that, so a lot of viewers, I've asked around, I talk to people a lot nowadays. I was like, hey, have you ever heard about the FBI National Academy and this? And I can tell you, if I ask 10 people, maybe 2 or 3 will know. And more than likely, those 1 or 2 people may be on. That's probably why they know about it. So how was your experience? Because when I went to that annual conference and spoke in July, August, I love the community I saw there, because for me, and like I said, for people that don't know, it was a group of leaders that all believed in training. And it's hard to get that environment. And even with my son, he was even there. He was like, yeah, man, this is so fun, Dad. They're doing this. But everybody had that vibe where I was like, you know what? I can see in their heart, not just what somebody tells them to do, in their heart, that they really want to see this industry grow. How was your experience in the FBI National Academy?
Yeah, my FBI National Academy experience was fantastic. As is the experience of most people that I talk to that have had the benefit to go through that program. I was aware of it pretty early on in my career, and again, I had the fortune of having an agency that's been active in that organization for many years. We've had people attend the National Academy, I think, since the 1940s or 50s. And wow. I didn't realize until I had gotten there, but the FBI National Academy was actually started back in the 1930s by J. Edgar Hoover, and it was
I didn't know that either.
It was with the goal at the time, and here we're coming back around to the standards again, Michael. But the goal at the time was to try to help foster some of those standards within law enforcement. And the FBI was a relatively new organization at that time, but being at a national level with national resources, was in a position where they were able to, I guess, kind of facilitate something like that. But I think the FBI would be the first to tell you they cannot do their job without cooperation of state and local law enforcement agencies. The FBI is a big organization, but it's not big enough to go out and police the United States. And they would be the first to tell you that the cooperation that they have with law enforcement agencies is the way that they keep the United States safe. And so what they did was they developed this national academy in the Washington, D.C., now it's in Quantico area. And they have law enforcement leaders, police chiefs, sheriffs, command staff from around the country go out there, and it's the curriculum certainly changed, over the years, but I think it's still pretty much the same core tenets. But there's an academic piece to it. It's sanctioned by the University of Virginia, so it's real college coursework. There's also a physical and wellness component to it. Did a lot of PT out there. Worked with, some of the best and brightest physical trainers that I've had the ability to meet with. EJ O'Malley was my physical fitness instructor out there, and the guy is an absolute animal. And did more for me in 11 weeks than anybody else that I've worked with. Coaches and trainers in my career. And then
Wow.
the third part is the professional networking and the cooperation, because again, back to all of our mission, crime knows no borders. We have to have partnerships with agencies and other organizations to be able to affect public safety and crime control within our own neighborhoods. And so what started in the 1930s to bring some of those standards to all corners of the United States is now continuing in 2023. I was there in 2022. But those three things, the academics, the physical fitness and wellness, and then the personal relationships and professional contacts that you build out there are just invaluable. And I still talk to people from my class every week, and about 250 of us in a class, and
Wow, I thought it was like 50.
Yeah, no, it's 200, about 250 people in your class. And,
oh wow.
I don't think there's been a week that's gone by. I graduated last December, but that I haven't reached out and talked to one of them about something. So
I thought this whole time in my head, I thought it was like 50 a class. 250 is a much larger number than I pictured.
Yeah, they push about 1,000 through per year. So it's just scratching the surface of the 800,000 or so law enforcement officers across the United States. But maybe the best kept secret in our industry. I would highly recommend it to anybody who has the opportunity.
And it's crazy because I have actually, although I've never attended, just the encounters I have, whether I was speaking at one of their quarterly seminars or speaking at the actual annual conference, everybody I talk to, like I said, I haven't been to it. I say, y'all, if you could get into this academy and get with these groups, like the knowledge at all aspects of your mind, and obviously on top of that, the networking is invaluable because once again, you're put into an environment where people want you to succeed. Like everybody's there, at least, if not everybody, 95% of people are there, one, because they chose to be there, but two, because they really want to, again, promote this industry. And they know that it does take time. And obviously the FBI has a winning formula because they know, although they are a very large federal law enforcement agency, there's still not enough of them to actually do. So they have to rely on local and state, like you said.
Yep, absolutely.
So as you have moved forward since the fall from that, from the National Academy, have you seen a change in your life from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in different ways. Certainly you're just, you're a product of your environment, right? And like you mentioned, you're there, integrated with some of the best and brightest in our industry. And nobody's there jockeying for the next promotion. Some people that have been through in my office have talked about that. It's there's no hidden agendas or anything like that. The agenda is making each other better and making law enforcement better. And so they tell you this when you're out there. I mean, there may not be another 10 weeks in your life that you get a chance to just focus on you. And that sounds a little bit selfish to do that, but I think it goes back to the wellness thing that you were talking about earlier. Investing in ourselves and investing in our people, it's a little bit counterintuitive because it sounds like you're being lazy or being selfish or things like that. But what you're doing is you are trying to set yourself up to be better than when you started. And hopefully if you can make yourself a little bit better in some areas, whether that's the academics, whether that's the physical fitness, the wellness, have more of a professional network so that when the child gets kidnapped from your jurisdiction, you have someone to call. That's ultimately going to benefit the people in your community because you are now better equipped to go out and do your job. You are better equipped to go and handle that call. You are better equipped to be a leader in your organization. And that's just a perpetual cycle of improvement. And whether that's at the National Academy, whether that's through IACP, whether that's just through your your local police officer association, it's so important. And you've got a lot of listeners that listen to your podcast, and maybe even some that aren't in law enforcement, but it starts before you even take the job. That we are looking for good people who can go out there and continue to be lifelong learners and get better throughout their career, because we need the next generation to step up and do it.
John, I'm gonna tell you right now, you know what I learned over the last 2 years when it came to self-awareness is that I have to be selfish about my own growth. You know why? Because if I'm going to be better for my family, I have to learn, I have to get better skills. Same thing, if I'm going to be good for the organization, I have to be better in things that I do. And the community want people with better skill sets. And it's hard it was hard for me to understand that. Like, it took time, but whenever I go speak, especially what I wrote my book on, or part of what I wrote my book on, awareness is you have to take an intentional role, like we take with our relationships, and use intentionality on yourself too. Like, if you don't, then you're never gonna hit your full potential, or you're never gonna get in the direction of getting there, because there's so many things that change. If you're not a constant learner, or you're not constantly doing something to get better, you're just going to become stagnant. Like, let's say fitness, for example. Like, I know I can tell for myself when I'm working out consistently and when I'm not. And when I'm not working out consistently, I'm more sluggish. I'm not as energetic. I'm not as impactful because I didn't spend that time on my own to get physically better. So same thing for our mental well-being. If you're not intentionally getting yourself to be stronger mentally by reading books, listening to podcasts, finding that higher calling, whatever it might be, you're going to find yourself regressing. And I think people like us, John, in a sense of law enforcement that was taught so long that you've had to put everybody else first, it's hard. It's hard for us to rewire our brain and say, you know what, maybe we should focus on ourselves more often. Because one thing that I stress is for people to spend at least 10% of themselves on them, to spend at least 10% of their day on themselves. And they say, well, that's a lie. I said, well, you're going to spend at least probably 40 to 50 at work, and then probably another 30 to 40 doing stuff with your family, eating, exercising. When is it going to be about you in that process? So, John, I think you're 100% right. It does sound weird, but it is necessary to keep moving forward.
I think it was Stephen Covey in his book on the 7 Habits talked about this balance of capacity versus production. And we all have a capacity, and then our production is kind of a percentage of that capacity. And so the way that I look at it sometimes is that if my production or my performance maybe is lacking, I have to, like you said, have that self-awareness to be able to diagnose why. There are ways that I can bring, my performance and my production up, but there's also things that we can do in our life to improve the capacity. And so, if we do take that time out, and maybe it's 10 weeks in Quantico, maybe it's just 10 minutes every day, but taking that time to intentionally increase that capacity, if your capacity goes up, but your performance stays the same, you're still putting out more than you were before. So I think it's important for us to do that and make that investment in ourselves, because that investment in ourselves becomes an investment in our agency, which then becomes an investment in our community, and it ultimately trickles out into our society to move the ball forward.
Yeah, I love that. For me, when I started to understand that and actually intentionally do it, it really did make a change in my life. Like, for example, with the podcast, I mean, people, they always ask me, how long have you been doing your podcast? And I tell them I've been doing it since 2020. However, I actually stopped for almost 2 years because I had lost my ability to manage my time effectively. And ultimately, it made me lose my interest and continuously like draining myself, because the podcasts are a lot of work, just like videos and speaking. So what I didn't realize about myself was I have to be intentional on my growth, and having the podcast allows me to fulfill some of that self-development, having the conversations with great folks like you, John. But I didn't realize that at the time, because I just wasn't looking at growing myself as a person in a sense of to where I had it on the forefront. And once again, because I had a mindset of, well, I'm doing this for somebody else. Well, I am, but the priority needs to be for myself too. So for me, these podcasts and hearing stories like Butter the Dog, while we may think it's funny, but it's pretty cool because it's reality. Like, I think of things that I have go on. I never had a Butter the Dog, so I don't have a story like have that particular story. However, like hearing like how you have a great relationship with your wife, like that's inspiring to people like myself that's not married right now that would get married. The 4 kids, that's another story in itself. I don't foresee that, but it does inspire me that you're able to effectively survive every day with 4 kids and a wife. But those are the things that build me up, and that I'm like, you know what? I need to be doing podcasts. I need to be doing professional speaking. I need to be creating online courses for law enforcement, because that's what I need for my own growth. It pushed me. Last night I was editing a presentation that took me I just got on it because I was like, I'm going to change a word on it. Next thing I know, an hour and a half later, I'm like, oh crap. I done looked up all these studies and these different statistics, but it grew me. So I think for the intentionality side of how we grow ourselves is really important. And the more we do it, the better we can get. And I know, John, you're a living testament of that, because you didn't have to go to this FBI National Academy. At the end of the day, everything's a choice. But developing yourself, and now it's, from my perspective, it seems like it has paid off in the sense of allowing you to have a better balance, because a place like that does give you more tools to optimize your life at all levels. So kudos to just getting yourself involved and actually going to do it.
Well, I appreciate it, and I wouldn't have been there without without help from a lot of people here to make it happen. Heather at home being one, but my staff at work, having anybody unplug for 10, 11 weeks to go halfway across the country is a big lift. And so I was very, very fortunate to have people behind me back here to make that work. One of the things that I brought back, and you talked about your podcast and the work that is. I had listened to podcasts, I don't know, several years. I mean, kind of since podcasts were a thing. But I had never really considered it in law enforcement, at least maybe from a law enforcement agency perspective, until I had been out in Quantico. And I was exposed to it out there with some people. Cynthia Lewis is an instructor there at the FBI Academy, and I took a advanced communication class from her, and so that kind of planted the seed of I wonder what a podcast would look like from an agency perspective. So when I got home, you don't want to just start throwing 100 ideas at the wall, but something that's always been in our strategic plan, and I've mentioned this in today already, is building those relationships with our community, and specifically building that public trust with our community. And so podcasting was something new, at least to our agency, but it's something that we rolled out as a way. So just like you said, we can have some of these conversations in maybe a little bit longer format than just what lends itself to a 30-second soundbite. We can provide some of the context behind the how and what we do to reinforce the why we do it. And so it's been something that's been fun for us. I know our sheriff and chief deputy co-host with me on the podcast as well, but it's been more of an outreach tool to go along with some of the other traditional things that we had been doing before. But like you said, it certainly helps to be able to dig into some of those issues a little bit deeper in a way that we can show behind the scenes, humanize the badge a little bit, and talk to our community about how we're doing what we're doing.
John, the crazy thing about podcasts is it's really no different from the radios from decades ago. It's just literally that now it's in a digital format. Whenever, and it took me a while to realize this, but when I explain that to people, I'm like, y'all know that two people speaking to each other over the air isn't anything new. It's actually, It was one of the ways we've been doing it actually for a couple of centuries. You hear these different radio interviews. It's just now it's packaged a lot prettier because we have something called Zoom versus a radio. Like anybody can do a podcast versus back in the day, you had to have at least some kind of radio frequency. But at the end of the day, a lot of the great conversations, and it sounds like you guys are feeling it over there in Lancaster, comes through things like podcasts, because you get to actually dive deeper into an issue. So with you, your command staff, it allows the community to see, you know what, these law enforcement officers are trying to make us better by giving us their ear. And through the podcast, you can actually have those. So your podcast, is it only internal, or how does that work for you guys?
No, we're out on Spotify, Apple, wherever you enjoy podcasts. But the 902 podcast is the name of it. And
okay,
902, speaking of radio, is actually a harken back to some of the 20th century days of old shortwave radio stuff. And 902 was how my sheriff's office was coded throughout the state of Nebraska on the old 39.9 radios. And so the 902 podcast has kind of become our platform to take our community and other people behind the scenes to see what we do and how we do it.
That's so cool. And it's guys, so law enforcement, if you're in command staff or you're simply on the outside, if your community or your agency doesn't have one, this may be the opportunity for you to look at one. I know there's a lot of people that are always nervous about, well, is this going to be censored or if that. The cool thing about a podcast is you can just edit it. If something that's said too outlandish for your community, then you tell them, hey, you know what, we're going to cut that. But in true, if you know the guests that are coming on, you understand them. Obviously, you're not trying to just get guests that are all pro law enforcement or all anti. But if you have somebody that has a message that can benefit your community, try to find a way to create a podcast and start doing that, because it's like, and I don't want to jump down this road too far, John, because I think this is a whole other podcast we can have. Social media, the impact that it has on your law enforcement agency. It's another avenue that I have seen agencies take, and the ones that are a little, what's the best word to use? They're a little risky, so to speak. They've seen some success in bringing out social media to, like, getting on TikTok or Instagram, and obviously Facebook.
Yeah,
just showing another side.
Yeah, and we do the social media stuff. Much to my I don't know what you'd call it. I had reservations about TikTok, but we're up on TikTok now too. But so we do all that stuff. But the podcast for us is just another extension, because you've got different sectors of your community that are going to reach you on different mediums and different platforms. And so we're just trying to be, somewhat diverse in the way that we're reaching out to those various groups and pockets in our community. The nice thing for me about podcasts is that somebody's got to put in some effort to listen to that stuff. So, so I was worried about, oh gosh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to do that? Well, somebody's got to invest some time to listen. And if they do, they're going to hear the context that comes with it. And so it's, if you are a law enforcement agency out there, I would highly recommend exploring it. We certainly weren't the first one. There's a really good one out of Broward County, Florida. Sheriff Greg Tony does a good job with one down there. And, we're trying to just give people a little inside look, tell some of those stories with context. And like you said, and it's produced by us, so it's going to come, from us, but we want to be the trusted source of news and information for public safety in our community.
John, people don't understand. Sometimes if you're going to control the narrative, you have to have a hand in it, because if you allow outside entities to tell your story, they're going to tell their version of it. Whether it's right or wrong, they're going to tell their version of it, and more than likely it's going to be designed more for entertainment versus actual factual information. So as you understand that, you like, you know what, maybe I should do a podcast. So when things come up, people are like, you know what, in Lancaster, they've already given 10 podcasts showing us how this is what they're aiming for. Maybe something bad happened, but we know where their heart's at, because they've already explained to us over time, this is how they're trying to build us. Because all agencies or people, everybody goes through something, but the community bounces back a lot easier once they see where your heart's at before all this stuff happens.
Without a doubt.
And people sometimes have a hard time recognizing that. So as we round out this podcast, John, where can people find you if they're trying to find out more information about John Vik?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure people find out about the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, because like many agencies around the United States, we are hiring. We're sitting pretty good right now, but the march goes on as far as retirements and things like that. So you can find information about the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office specifically at joinlso.com. And that's where you can find career information out about my agency. And we're all over social media. All of our stuff is at LSO Nebraska, Facebook, X, Instagram, even TikTok now. But as far as me directly, I'm on LinkedIn, just under my name, John Vik. It's JOHNVIK. And I'm on X as well. At least on my professional account is at LSO CAPTVIK. So at LSO Captain Vik on X, you can find me there. But
for sure, and I'll have in the show notes, I'll make sure for you guys, so you don't have to search too hard. I'll make sure I'll put the hashtag or the handle in there, as well as the website. But as you guys can tell, he's hiring, and apparently, if you want to find an agency that believes in professional standards and growth and having positive impacts on the community, Lancaster Sheriff's Office is for you.
That's right.
And you guys, go ahead, John.
And Michael, you've got a young son, and I don't know. I'm told that Nebraska is the first state in the country that's done this, but we are now actually offering in-state tuition waivers for not only law enforcement officers but their dependents. So,
wow,
your kids can go to college for free, at least tuition free, in the state of Nebraska now. So,
if I don't know how good you market that, but there's a lot of us that are parents that are very nervous on where our kids are going to school and how we're going to pay for it. For me, I don't know how you did it, John. I pay for all my school, but I know that's not always the reality. So I have to, at least in my head, say, well, where's my son going to go? Who's going to pay for his school?
I had the military scholarship, I guess is what I'll call that, for myself. But yeah,
I don't know if it counts like that. You did give about 6 years of your life, so
yeah. But no, for a guy like me with 4 kids, that's that's real money, but it's definitely, I'm fortunate to live in a state that has seen the value of that investment in public safety here, and it's something that our people deserve. So we're certainly happy to market that and talk to anybody who's interested in careers here. Hit me up, even if you got a question about podcasting stuff. I'm happy to answer that. I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go back and at least virtually and guest instruct on a podcasting class back at the National Academy at the FBI. So I love sharing. I am not an expert in any of that stuff, but I'm happy to share mistakes and stuff that I've learned along the way, and hopefully how to make people better. But yeah, our podcast is the 902 podcast, and that's on all the major podcast platforms too.
Yeah. And I'll tell people, if you want to start a podcast, all you really need is a Zoom account and a microphone. And even the microphone might be optional, but the microphone does make the quality better. But guys, I mean, if you're trying, don't make this seem like it's a big science project for the fair to start a podcast. It just takes people that want to build. So if you're looking for that information, once again, John is a good resource because they are doing it, especially if you're looking at the law enforcement side agency, that he can give you the guidance on how to at least get it started. Obviously, you'd have to go through your public information officer, your chief, your sheriff, your director to make sure that everything aligns with that side of it. But getting that conversation started, I think, is important. And I know John, especially based on what he said up to this point, I believe he'd be a good resource for you guys. But John, you still got me. You threw me off with that tuition thing for the kids, because one thing people don't realize, and you may not think about it until you have kids, is that's like a hidden savings account. So in a sense of, if you're making, let's throw out a number, let's say you're making $50,000 a year, but you have one kid in college that's going for free because you're working, you're really probably making $70,000 a year because you're saving that money. So that's the real numbers of it. So when you start really diving into it, you're like, wait, I just made an extra $20,000 a year because while I was working, my kid was in college. So I didn't have to spend that 20 that I was going to have to spend anyways because I was working for them. So guys, those are the real costs when you start thinking about it, when you start thinking about your budget and what you're spending versus what you can. So that's important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So John, any final words?
I just want to thank you again so much for the opportunity to be on your podcast, and appreciate all the work that you're doing for our career and for our industry, Michael. Law enforcement is, and if I have anything to do with it, will remain the best career in the world. And it's rewarding work, it's fulfilling work, and it's just so it's such important work. But very happy to be a member of that community. Happy to be a member of a very professional law enforcement agency here at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, and just really appreciate your time.
Hey, John, I appreciate it. I can tell you the audience appreciate that you saw my calendar early, because I know sometimes on my night podcast, they're like, this guy's dragging a little bit. So I am very energetic. And like, it's like this morning as I get ready to go in and do other work. So I appreciate your time. And I hope for the folks that are listening, you guys were able to take as many notes as I did. If not, I will have notes in the show notes for you all. But make sure, if you're looking for anything that we talked about today, that you reach out to John, because I love for you to reach out to me too, but I want you to go to the person that brought up these good answers. I want you to go directly to him as well to show support and let him know some of the things that he's doing well. But once again, guys, I thank you for your time. I thank you for being on here. You know, our make to ensure that we're humanizing the badge, and we're showing that, like each and every one of you, we all have things going on, but we're finding different ways each day to get better, and share that with you. Thank you, all of you that had a chance to listen, and be safe.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaelalaidler.com and hit the website at michaelalaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Like that, I'm going to be leaving a note. My vehicle is driving in the remote.